Maybe if I had a shot of whiskey, that would cure it. Right?
Just saying.
Isn't that a cure-all?
Yeah, I think so.
Didn't
That's why I have
parents do
7 or
that?
8 a night. I never get sick.
I know, exactly. just like kill everything in there.
Everything. Yeah, good
Fix
stuff,
it.
bad stuff,
All of it.
feelings, mostly feelings. Hello, and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation in all things. I am Michael Gray.
And I am Erin Green.
How are you?
I'm doing well. You trip me up with that little pause every time, and I'm just waiting to talk over the top of you.
I kind of like it now. It's kind of like a thing. I do.
It's like the game of
there it
chicken.
is.
Who's gonna
gonna-
do this? Yeah. Have you seen that commercial with oh my gosh, Tim Tebow and the other Heisman winner, and they're riding in the car together, and he keeps cutting him like he's like anticipating his sentences and cutting him off and just answering his questions before he even opens his mouth. It's really funny.
Nice. I have not
Reminds
seen
me
that.
of you.
Well, I was going to say maybe us.
Us.
'Cause
Yes.
I feel like we either are talking over each other or we're just waiting. It's always this weird game at the beginning of the intro. It's like, what's going to happen? Are we going
And
to
you
talk
would
over?
think-
Or are we going to wait?
Because we see each other in the screen and because we know each other by now, you would think that we'd get this straightened out. Sorry, folks.
Hey,
We'll keep
Hey.
working on it.
it is what it is. We're keeping it real, right? We keep it
Yeah,
real on
exactly.
Middleish. Yeah. So how's things going?
Pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah?
just a foggy morning here. I am anticipating some more snow. I finally got out on my new skis last Friday, which was fabulous. So I've officially made that transition from longing for bike season to, hey, it's time to ski, which
Mhm.
is always nice because that's a sad place to be where you're like longing for this, sport that you just can't do right now because of
Yeah.
the weather.
And you're doing downhill, not cross country, right?
Cross country.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
I downhill skied when I was in high school and college, and then, oh geez, when we moved a couple years ago, I just gave
Mhm.
away my stuff because I wasn't using it anymore. I hadn't been downhill skiing for, well, probably the duration of my pro triathlon career, so 7, 8 years or something.
Okay. Yeah,
So
wow.
I mean, between getting cold on the chairlift and the amount of time, like you go up to the mountain and it's all day, like it's an all day thing. I mean, I guess you could go
Right.
for just a few hours, make a few runs, or whatever. But I don't know. I got into cross country skiing. I love the workout. I love that I can go up there and,
Mhm.
knock out an hour of skiing and feel totally satisfied. And like I got a great workout. I got outside. Yeah. So
Nice. Does Matt
skate
go with
skiing.
you, or you go solo, or you have friends you go with?
No, I made that mistake several years ago when I got into skate skiing.
Of inviting him?
Well, no, I compared skate skiing to swimming in that it's a very technique intensive sport and you can be a very strong athlete cardiovascularly, but if your
Mhm.
technique is crap, you're just going to like wallow your way through and not really go anywhere and just destroy yourself and get frustrated. And Matt was like, yeah, I don't need to try that.
I'm out.
I don't think I need to do that. He hates swimming, by the way. So that was
Oh,
like the nail
okay.
in the coffin was I just
Yeah.
mentioned it's kind of like swimming in that. And he's like, enough said, enough. I don't need to know.
Hey, you know that thing you hate? It's just like that. Want to go?
Exactly. So he's gone up a couple times just to like shoot video of me or whatever. And
Mhm.
he's just he's not real thrilled with winter in general. So
I feel you, Matt. I feel you.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would not be surprised if someday he convinces me to move somewhere that doesn't really have a winter.
Yeah.
It'll be a while, and I think it would really take some convincing, but
Yeah.
I could see that being a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I really enjoy not having like a legitimate winter.
you do. I'm sure you
Big
do, but
fan.
I am not jealous about what's going on with your weather in say like May, June. Is that when July? Is that when it starts getting oppressive
So it
down
starts
there?
getting pretty humid and warm. Like, yeah, by May, it's humidity is pretty high, and then
Hmm.
it's like really like peaks. I think like end of July, August, first part of September, like those
Okay.
couple of months are where the literal, like the actual word for the humidity level is oppressive. First time I saw it, I was like, oh boy,
Oh,
that's a
geez. Yeah,
strong word.
we mean business here.
Yeah. Yeah. But you deal with it. You get out
Yep.
early and you just kind of accept. Like it got easier for me this summer once I just accepted, like, okay, if I'm going to be outside, like mowing the lawn or whatever, I just know I'm just going to be soaked. That's just the way it is, as
Yeah.
opposed to getting frustrated about it. And that made it easier, just,
Yeah. If you just accept it. It's
yeah.
funny how acceptance can sort of move us along in a
Mm-hmm.
positive direction and
Yeah.
make it less of a fight, right?
Well, I quit fighting internally with it, I think is what it was. I was just like, all right, well, this is just what it is. It's going to be a few months and then I'll be fine. And yeah,
Right.
it was a lot easier to handle, but yeah.
Very good. So no winter, but you have oppressive humidity.
Hmm. Yeah. It's been pretty cold cold for here the last couple of weeks. Like we've had a few lows in the 30s. A lot of mornings,
Oh, that is cold. Yeah.
like 40, 41, 42. And then our highs, like high 50s but just like windy and rainy, and it hasn't
Mm-hmm.
been the greatest weather lately, but hopefully we got some sun today. And usually winters here are like 65, 70, no humidity, blue skies, gorgeous. So hopefully that's
Don't
coming
you guys have a
soon.
big storm coming through? Like I was seeing on the news, there's this huge like winter storm moving across and like going kind
Uh,
of up the East Coast, but it looked like down around where you are, there was like a bunch of rain that was supposed
mhm.
to, or did that already move through?
Well, we've got no, well, I don't know if it's done, but we have over the last probably 2 weeks now, we've had a bunch of rain, a lot of rain. There's been probably 4 days where we've just had like pouring rain,
Yeah.
like an inch and a half of standing water in the lawn, like just pouring. So we've had a lot of water, not the greatest, temperatures, not a lot of sun. It's been kind of a dreary couple weeks, but
Mm.
I don't think
So
that's
you,
typical.
yeah.
I don't know.
So you all didn't know that this was a weather podcast, did you?
Yeah. Are you guys excited? Let's
Michael
move
and
on
I
to
can
more
catch up about the weather.
exciting things.
Yeah, let's talk about today's topic, which is um,
Booze.
alcohol.
Booze.
And since this is a moderation podcast, we're talking about moderate alcohol consumption and just
Hmm.
alcohol in general.
Yeah.
And when Michael and I first came up with the idea for this topic, we had joked around like, let's plan it on a day where we can like have a glass of wine or some whiskey or whatever and do this podcast on alcohol. How fun would that be? And then I was texting Michael last night just to make sure that we were on the same page with the topic we're going to square away. And he's like, "Are we drinking?" I was like, "It's 11 a.m. I don't think
We
I'll be
could.
productive."
We
We
could do
could,
it.
but Aaron would have an all-time low productivity level.
Yeah, I got several calls this afternoon, so it may not be good talking with
Yeah,
clients. So how
probably not.
is it?
Right.
How's
Yes.
it going? Yeah.
Did you know that the time of day impacts alcohol metabolism? I was reading that
I did not.
what did it say at the end of the dark daylight? What does it say? The end of the dark period, whatever that means.
Sounds like the start to a really depressing book.
I know.
At the end of the dark period.
The end of the daily dark period, because of your body temperature changes when your circadian
Mhm.
rhythms at different times, it can improve alcohol metabolism.
Hmm.
So end of the daily dark period. I mean, that would be like right before sunup, wouldn't
Yeah,
it?
it's morning, right?
So yeah, everybody, I guess like
So you need to drink
plan
first thing in the morning, is what we're saying. Right
plan
from the
that.
get go.
Yeah, geez, we just lost like 90% of our listeners, they're like, hey, Aaron and Michael are talking about, adding an eye opener to your day. No, that is absolutely
Booze it
not
up.
what we're talking.
Put some whiskey in that coffee.
My point was that there are a lot of things that impact alcohol metabolism.
Yeah,
So we can talk about those things.
we can. So yeah, we're going to talk about alcohol, kind of some potential consequences, potential benefits, kind of how the body processes it, things it can do in the body, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So before we get going, well, I guess maybe this is the start of getting going. I'm curious. Do you have a good drunk story you can share?
Oh, geez. A good,
Just one, Aaron. Just one of them.
a
One
good
of the
one that
many.
a good one that I can share.
Hey, we're all
that
family here.
Right.
No
Jeez,
one's
way to
judging
put me
you.
on the
No one's judging
spot.
you.
Um, oh, man, I have. So, okay, this is one that I can share that I think is kind of entertaining. We went to a New Year's Eve party several years ago,
Mhm.
where it was like a black tie cocktail dress kind of thing at this local restaurant, dancing and the whole thing, and it was
Mhm.
just like you pay this fee and then you just get in for the night and you have all the appetizers you want and then the beer and
Nice.
the wine you want, but then you could buy at the open bar. So of course, that kind of setting, you can almost guarantee that you need to have an alternative mode of transportation home.
Right.
And so my husband and I lived like, I mean, maybe a 15-20 minute walk from this restaurant. So it wasn't that far,
Mhm.
but it's New Year's Eve. It's freaking cold here in Idaho.
Right.
And I wore these sparkly, like 5-inch stiletto crazy shoes that I never wear that kind of shoe, but it was, fun. And I was like, there is no way I'm going to walk home in these shoes with alcohol in my system, because
Mhm.
as we will talk about it, anybody who has been drinking knows that it impairs your coordination and your balance and all of this stuff.
What?
So I felt so smart. I stashed an old pair of flip-flops in the bush out in front of the restaurant. Right? This is brilliant. Michael, this is
I like
impressive.
this
And
story a whole lot already.
I encourage anybody to steal this idea because it was the best idea. I left the restaurant and of course it's freezing cold, but I was like, I don't care. 20 minutes, I can make it home. There was no snow on the ground. So
Mhm.
I took off my very dangerous shoes and put on flip-flops and trucked it home. And I was like making tracks. I mean, Matt was back there like a block behind me, just like, well, why are you walking so fast? And I was like, because it's like 15 degrees. My feet are bare, but I can walk really quickly and carry my really dangerous sparkly shoes. So that was probably another effect of alcohol is that maybe your decision making capabilities might be impaired. I
I have
mean,
never heard that before.
I know that's so weird, but but it worked for me and I
Yeah,
made it home and I still have all 10 toes, so we're good.
that's good. Now, was that the last time you wore those shoes?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't even know if I have them anymore, to be honest.
Was it the last time you've hidden a pair of flip flops in a bush?
No.
No. Oh, really?
Oh, come on. It's
Huh.
triathlon. Like,
Oh, okay.
you know how many times I've stashed flip flops in or like around swim starts and near a pond
I
or
don't because
outside
I've
of
never done
a
that once
lot,
in my
a
life.
lot
I've
of time.
never even
Yeah.
thought about doing it.
Welcome to the glamorous lifestyle of a triathlete, a resourceful one, might I add, who
Yeah.
has healthy, happy feet. Because
Healthy and happy feet.
what
All
about
right.
you,
No, I don't have
my
any.
friend?
Nope.
Oh, come on.
I don't. I've never had a drink of alcohol in my life.
And welcome to the lying episode
The
of
lying
Middleish.
episode. You can
Let's all
lie
tell
in
lies.
moderation. Yeah. Okay. So this was 16 years ago, 17 years ago, quite a while ago. And I've never been like, I never had a big drinking period in my life or anything, so it never took much for me to get tipsy. But So I was working at a like a private school, elementary school. I taught like a 3-year-old classroom, and one Friday night, some of the teachers and it was like a very close knit like family school. There were like, I don't know, maybe 30 kids in the whole school from third grade to fifth grade. Like I think 6 kids was maybe the biggest class, and families knew each other well and got along. And so we all went out one Friday night to have some drinks. And there were these 2, I call them grandmas. They were grandmas, but they were probably in their, I would say, mid 60s at that point. And they were hilarious. And they invited me to have tequila shots with them, right? They're like, we're buying you tequila shots. I'm like, all right,
Oh,
cool.
wow.
And so in my, let's see how 24, something like that, 25-year-old brain, I thought, I can hang with these grandmas. I can hang with, like, I can outdrink grandmas, right? So we go toe to toe with shots for the whole night. And I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 in, I'm like, I'm done. I'm going to die now. Like, this is the part where I die. And they are fine. And there's another shot and another shot. And it gets to the place where I'm just like, I have to leave. I have to go home now because this is going to be really bad.
Mayday.
And they're fine. They're functioning just totally fine. They're having a great time. And I'm like, I hate all of this. I hate all of you. I just want to leave, right? Like, this is awful. And so I get home, whoever I was with, they take me home. And at that point I lived in an apartment complex and it was on the 2nd story. And I remember getting out of the car, laying in the grass, looking at the stairs and just going,
I'll never make it.
I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm going to die in the grass at the base of these stairs. And this is how it ends. And I did make it up, but it was a rough night and a rough day. It was real bad. Yeah. So that's the night I got severely like drank under the table by a couple of grandmas.
The grandmas. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things I read about alcohol metabolism is that women tend to have a higher rate of elimination than men.
I believe it.
Which is an interesting concept to me because I always believed women were kind of known as like having a lower tolerance or like a lightweight kind of thing going on. But there's a lot of factors that go into alcohol metabolism. And I'm just wondering if these little grandmas you were drinking with, had a little more drinking experience than you. Maybe we're a little more consistent with their consumption.
I would say that's a fair bet.
And so they have a better enzymatic reaction because the enzymes in the liver is what breaks down the alcohol. There's a few other, I'm simplifying it, but there's a few other things involved. But then also, women do have a faster rate of elimination. So it is very feasible that, these women, if they condition themselves to their bodies to know how to process alcohol a little bit faster, they would drink you under the table, my friend.
And they did.
It stuck with you.
I never went out with that group of people again. It's like, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Can't hang with the grandmas.
I cannot do it. I have no interest. I felt terrible. It's one of the worst I've ever felt in my life. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll talk about hangovers too a little bit and what goes on there because that's right. Yeah. No, I've never had a good hangover.
I don't know if there is such a thing. Is there? Yeah. Is there a good hangover?
Nope.
Yeah.
So, alcohol metabolism. Basically, a drink is swallowed. You drink the alcohol, it goes into your stomach, and there's a little bit of digestion that can happen in that stomach, but primarily it's shunted into your bloodstream and sent to the liver for metabolism. So the active enzyme that is really involved in this is called alcohol dehydrogenase. You could call it ADH, or you could just forget that if you don't care about alcohol metabolism and physiology. But the reason I bring up that ADH enzyme is because your body can adjust the amount of ADH that it produces. There's a lot of factors that go into that. So genetics, and like I said, how often you drink alcohol, whether you're male or female. There's even some factors that impact that depending on your athletic fitness.
Like body weight, muscle mass, all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And alcohol is water soluble. It is not very soluble in fat or,
Mhm.
other substances in the body. So if you think about, how blood alcohol level rises, your blood is primarily water. I mean, we don't think of it that way, but it is primarily water. So that is the major carrier. Your water containing organs and substances in your body are what carry the alcohol. So somebody who might have a higher fat mass will have a lower distribution of the alcohol carried in their system because it just can't be soluble in that
Mhm.
fat in their body. Um, so that can impact, how fit somebody is, can impact how their body distributes that alcohol and then their blood alcohol level. And also, if you have a higher rate of fitness, you likely have better circulation. You
Mhm.
can, your body can shunt that alcohol around a little bit more efficiently and, carry the leftover metabolites after the alcohol is processed, can carry that to be processed by the liver as well.
Mhm.
But I think it's important for people to understand that alcohol contains calories.
Right.
Okay. So per gram, you have about 7 calories for a gram of alcohol. Carbohydrate and protein have 4,
Mhm.
and then fat has 9.
Mhm.
So, really, if you line up alcohol into those different calorie levels, it's on the higher end, as far as like per gram, how many calories you're getting. But your body doesn't have a way of storing the alcohol as an energy source for later. You
Right.
can store carbohydrates, protein, or fat for later. Your body doesn't have that ability with alcohol. And so the preference is for your body to clear that out and metabolize the alcohol first.
Mhm.
Now, the challenges this presents is, I mean, what else are you consuming with the alcohol that is going
Right.
to be stored, you know?
Right. Yep.
um, and how is that alcohol then, used for energy?
Right.
And there's no hormonal component to alcohol metabolism like there is for carbohydrate, fat, or protein metabolism. And so there's a huge, tremendous burden put on the liver. One, because it's really the only way the alcohol can be processed. But then two, it's trying to clear the alcohol before anything else is
Right.
metabolized.
Right.
So keep that in mind when, we'll talk about like the amounts and moderation and what all that looks
Mhm.
like, but just keep this in mind as to how your body processes the alcohol when it's consumed.
Right. And it's an important thing to remember because I think a lot of times people don't think of calories from alcohol, right?
Mhm.
Um, it,
They say like,
it
oh, the
it's a
sugar in the, mixed drinks or whatever.
yeah, which is true too, but alcohol just in and of itself has calories, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so and you brought up a good point. I think, it's important to look at, sure, there's calories in the alcohol, but a lot of times engaging in activities where you're drinking alcohol includes other things, right? Like if you're at the bar,
Like the
there's
taco truck out front.
right, or yeah, or the snack foods at the house, or the appetizers at the bar or whatever. And so there's that's consumed with it, but those foods that are eaten are not the priority to metabolize, so they are, we're saving those for later, right? We're storing those, which may not be an ideal situation. And then on top of that, alcohol can really, it can decrease your inhibition. It can, it can affect decision making and that kind of stuff. And so a lot of times you're a lot more likely to eat more of those things, right? Because
Yep.
maybe you're not paying attention as much, which is easy in a social environment. You have more than a few drinks, and now maybe judgment is affected and that kind of stuff. And now maybe you're taking in even more calories than you realize that are continuing to not be prioritized for being metabolized because of the alcohol consumption you've got going on. So it's an important thing to know about those circumstances and those situations, about how that stuff can um, I'm not anti-alcohol by any means. I don't think Aaron is either. But so we're not saying that. But I think it's important to know in those situations, stuff can really stack up against you quick, and not that, like we say all the time, not that we need to put a lot of emphasis on one night. You can't, you're not going to ruin things in one night or that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's important to have that mindfulness and that awareness and just kind of know what's going on in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we'll talk about kind of that disinhibition that happens with alcohol, and having some food in your stomach before you start drinking can really help slow that alcohol consumption. And one of the things I have seen with several clients when we could go out, would be if they choose, I'm not really one to like pick on alcohol, um, just depending on the client and how they perceive their own alcohol consumption. A lot of clients will just straight up say, I would like this to be lower. I would like to address this. And sure. We'll work on that. And of course, disclaimer, I stay in my lane when it comes to that kind of stuff. If there's really a problem here, I will refer to the appropriate sources, but we're talking like social drinking, consuming enough that it is having an impact on their diet and their health, and they just want to fix it. So back to having something to eat before the drink, I will see this a lot in that sort of, okay, it's after work, we go to happy hour. And happy hours, a lot of times will have like 2 for 1 or, those kinds of things. And, or it's a certain, under a certain price for this amount of time. And so there's kind of this like incentive to have more than one drink.
Right.
And drinks come faster than food, right? And that's what restaurants are always, they're there to ask you if you want your drink first. And that's a nice way to start a meal sometimes. I mean, I will totally start by sipping some wine before my meal arrives. But also know that alcohol will hit your system faster. So if you don't want to experience some of those effects of alcohol, it's really nice to have the relaxation, that kind of, it's a little bit of respite from the day, like it triggers my day is over. However, if you know yourself well enough to acknowledge that, like, man, once I start feeling that way and once my inhibitions start kind of softening, I'm more likely to order a second drink. I'm more likely to maybe order something off the menu that I wouldn't necessarily order, or I'm more likely to stay out late, or, pay attention to that kind of chain reaction that happens with alcohol, especially if you are just drinking on an empty stomach. I think that's, just simply switching up the order of things could make a difference in how that experience plays out for you that night or for the rest of your week even.
Right. Yeah. The next day, the hangover, how severe that
is.
The
hangover.
Which I will say, I feel like this has worked before in the past. I mean, I haven't drank, heavily for a long time. I just don't really anymore, but also just being well hydrated.
Yeah. The grandmas ruined that for you, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. I have a couple of those stories and that was enough. But just even being well hydrated, that a lot of the effects of the negative effects of, well, I don't know if there are positive effects of a hangover, but the negative effects of the hangover has to do with just dehydration and the sugar levels, content of alcohol and that kind of stuff. And a lot of why you feel so crappy is because there's some dehydration going on. So even just staying well hydrated through a night, at a party or if you're out or even at home, whatever, can really kind of help minimize a lot of those unwanted effects in the evening and the night and the next day.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what moderation looks like with alcohol. So moderate alcohol consumption is defined in the U.S. dietary guidelines. For women, it's 7 drinks per week average. And for men, it's 14 drinks per week. Now, I get a lot of people, I present this when I like go and talk to, corporate wellness groups or whatever. And they're like, the women balk at this and they're like, that's BS. Like the men get twice as much. And that really is based on body size, for the most part. But then also I sometimes I'm met with this, woohoo, I can have my, save them all up and have them on a weekend. Sorry to say, that's not how it works. And I was reading an article. I was reading an article by Harvard School of Public Health that was kind of explaining that there are studies. I mean, yes, that is kind of a blanket recommendation, if this is what, or sorry,
Sure.
I should say definition,
Right.
not a recommendation
Recommendation.
of,
I like that.
of
Are you
moderation.
having your 14 drinks a week?
Make sure
Do
you
you
get
want to
them
be
in.
healthy or not?
And this article through Harvard School of Public Health was talking about how they looked at like that distribution throughout the week. And Michael and I will talk in a second about some of the possible benefits, consequences of alcohol consumption. But really the possible benefits that we have seen from this come from that sort of trickle effect throughout the week. So I saw a range from a half a drink a day to no more than 4. And guess what binge drinking is defined as?
4.
4 or more in
4
a
or more.
setting.
Yeah.
Now, that's another thing that I get kind of the deer in headlights look in this, like,
People are like,
oh boy. Yeah,
that's
I'm
every
in trouble.
night.
So just be aware of some of these boundaries with, when risk or benefit is kind of associated with certain things. And let's just be clear that if you are a non-drinker, there is absolutely no recommendation that you start drinking.
Right.
Because there are far more things you can do that we know are health protective in the areas we'll talk about in a second, that that alcohol is like a very minimal player, and all of the studies that have been done on this are association. So like we see that, somebody who's a moderate drinker, has an association like this. It doesn't mean cause and effect. So just be clear on that one.
So what's your drink of choice, and how often do you have a drink?
Yeah. Wine would be it for me. Although I did read that beer is still the king in the US in terms of popularity.
Yeah.
But wine is probably my favorite. I think because I really do appreciate the flavors it brings out in food and the story behind the wine. I have a good friend who's a winemaker. Hi, Dusty and Karin. I know they listen to us and they would appreciate this, but Dusty is always sharing the story behind the wine and the grapes and the process. And I'm not a som or anything. Like I can't, taste all of these really, but I appreciate what is going on in the wine and how it changes after you open it and when you pair it with food and, if it sits for a day and what that does to it. So I just love the depth of wine. And of course it's a nice, like, kind of bookend to my day sometimes where it's just like, okay, I am not required to do anything else but relax tonight. And this is the signal for that.
Nice.
How often? I would say now that I'm not racing professionally, it's probably somewhere between 4 or 5 drinks a week. Of course, there are sometimes when it's more than that. And then there are sometimes it's less than that. Like, I don't think I've had a drink since Friday of last week. And here it is Wednesday.
Thought you were going to say this morning.
But I didn't put any in my tea.
I haven't had any since breakfast.
It's tea. Yeah. But when I was training, I had put this, it was self-imposed and it was totally arbitrary. I think I chose this limit for myself because it would allow me enough flexibility to go do a normal social gathering function, like a wedding or a party or something, and not feel like, you can't drink. But 2 drinks a week was my, I would say, target. Or, I mean, it's not like I had to hit the 2 drinks, and it's not like if I had 4 or more that I would like be upset with myself. For me, that worked. So I could go out one night with my husband and have a glass of wine midweek. And then I could go to a barbecue or something on the weekend and have a drink. And for me, it was very much imposed by the demands of training.
Sure.
I was so protective of my sleep, and we'll talk about all of these things, but sleep, motivation to train, my physical ability to put out the work at the high end that
levels,
that I was demanding. And just, I mean, physiologically there's alcohol, contributes to hypoxia and impacts our O2 saturation and muscle protein synthesis and all of these other things. So for me, it was a, a very clear, like I could have just drawn a line and said, no alcohol, which
Mm-hmm.
I've done before in my life. And it's, I survived just fine.
Yeah.
At the same time, if I do get a social enjoyment out of it, relaxation, if it does help me unwind or helps me kind of just switch off and it's that nice signal for me, it's, I think it's a perfectly appropriate,
Yeah.
um, you know, addition
Right.
to all of these other behaviors I'm doing. So,
Right.
so yeah.
Well, it can negatively affect like hormone production too. Like, right.
Yep.
Like testosterone,
Particularly
which,
testosterone, but
yeah,
yeah.
helps with,
Yeah.
shedding body fat and building muscle, that kind of stuff. So for an athlete or just anyone who's wanting to, maybe change their body composition a little bit to a lower body fat percentage, it could have be a barrier a little bit, towards getting there as quickly as you'd like, maybe. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I
yeah.
think I read something a few years back that talked about, the whole theory of the beer gut
Mm-hmm.
and where that comes from. And it does have to do with the way alcohol is metabolized preferential to the other
Oh, really?
nutrients we talked about. And so there was something, and
Interesting.
there's like some hormonal effect too that goes into that because,
Sure.
alcohol isn't super dependent on hormonal, intervention and metabolism, but then those other nutrients are.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're seeing an impact on your entire hormonal system, whether it's testosterone or other hormones, then
Yeah.
that could definitely impact your fat distribution. So I'd have
Sure.
to dig that up again to see the details. But I do remember there was,
Interesting.
I mean, I'm sure it's like extrapolated somehow, and
Mm-hmm.
like, um, so yeah,
Yeah.
there's something there.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your favorite? You're a whiskey guy, aren't you?
I'm a whiskey guy, in particular, or for the most part, bourbon. There's couple scotches that are okay, and a couple of Japanese whiskeys, one in particular that I really like. But for the most part, I buy and drink bourbon. Um, and I probably have a finger or two, 5, 6 nights a week.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit in the evening. It's kind of my cap too. Right around when putting the girls to bed, I'll pour a little finger and just kind of sip on that through the night and into the evening. When I'm watching TV or something, just kind of relaxing. But
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I had a beer. I like whiskey better. I like the taste of it better. And beer just fills me up so much. Like I just feel, so bloated. If I have one, I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm done. I don't feel that great, Um, so whiskey takes up a whole lot of that space in my stomach, which is
Yeah.
kind of nice
I
too.
believe it.
Yeah.
And I
But
would imagine like a lot of different bourbons and whiskeys, just knowing that Matt is a bourbon guy,
mhm.
a lot of them have kind of a story going on with them too. And I know beer has that and some of the others, but there's a
But there's
depth of flavor depending on how they do the bourbon that,
there's a depth of flavor, and I feel like there's just like sort of a romance behind whiskey. You know what
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean? Like it's a very storied alcohol. Um, I mean, you have like, some of the great authors and poets were, whiskey drinkers, and it's interesting, the whole story, how it came to America and bourbon, and yeah, it's very storied, which I think is interesting too. I really enjoy kind of reading, kind of stories of bourbons or whiskeys that I like how this come
Mhm.
to be, what's the story behind it. And, these little small family owned operations or something that started, when people were bootlegging and, it's just
Yeah.
interesting. It's very
I,
interesting.
I
It's a kind
just
of a
heard,
culture behind it. It's very much like wine.
I just heard a really cool news story a few weeks ago where this, fighter jet pilot, I think it's
Hmm.
back in Virginia, partnered up with his buddy who makes bourbon.
Hmm.
And they put the bourbon in the barrels and then loaded them into the jet and started pulling G's to cause the bourbon to seep more into the barrels and like get more of a
Interesting.
flavor. Yeah. And how they oaked it. So they use oak
Wow.
for bourbon too, right? Oak barrels. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I don't know if they have to. I'm not real familiar
But
on what
anyway,
the
it was a
qualifications are.
super cool story. I'll send it to you
Yeah.
because and then I wanted to try and get that bourbon for Matt, and I
Mhm.
emailed them and I tried and whatever. They're over in Virginia. So I think
Oh,
that's a lost cause, but it was a really cool story. So
yeah.
yeah, I like the kind of that, the romance that goes into it, like you said.
Yeah, it's fun. And most whiskeys, it seems like, have some sort of interesting story behind it.
Hmm.
Because I don't think you take on something like making whiskey without some sort of interesting thing. Because for good whiskeys, like you gotta wait a long time. You know what I mean? Like it's not like you just, like a soup, like you go make some and it's ready. It's like, all right, I'm making this, and in 10 years, we'll see how it is. It's like it's
Yeah,
a real investment. You know what I mean?
no kidding.
So it's just interesting too. I like that aspect of it.
So, have you noticed a change in your alcohol consumption since the pandemic hit?
Yeah, yeah. It's picked up a bit, and probably right initially it did a lot more, and
Hmm.
for like March and April, and I was like, okay, this is maybe a bit much.
I have
Yeah,
some statistics for March and April.
let's do it. We can move on from my shame to statistics.
No, I will totally
I'm just kidding.
shame myself with you.
Yeah.
Um,
It was
that
most
I
days
noticed.
like 3:30. I was like, I think I'm done working.
I know, right? Like
I'm gonna pour a
it's what
glass and
else am
go
I
sit in the
gonna do?
backyard while the world falls apart.
Well, and it just for me it was, I mean, the memes and kind of some of the humor
Hmm.
behind it, and the fact that I don't have a struggle with alcohol dependency.
Hmm.
I think it made it kind of this safe and almost humorous part of like coping with the
Right.
pandemic. And I realize it has not been like that for everybody. So
Right.
this isn't meant to be insensitive, but for me
Right.
it was like, yeah, wine for you wine at 3 p.m. Like, why not?
Why not?
So alcohol sales were up 54% in late March compared to 2019. And this is from a Nielsen report that I found. And online sales were up 500% in late April. So, right at the high point of the shutdown, I mean, that's nuts.
Hmm.
500%. And
Yeah.
like you said, I mean, if it can be delivered to your door, why not? In fact,
Why go anywhere?
we got takeout from this great place, one of our favorite places in Boise earlier this summer, and they
Hmm.
had to go cocktails. And you order it, and it comes in a bottle that's like the size of a wine bottle.
Hmm.
And it had like the instructions on a little tag, and there were certain parts that you had to add, like the squeeze of lime, was
Hmm.
included. And then they had like this chili salt that you put on the rim of the glass, and
Hmm.
it explained like, this is how
Nice.
make this cocktail. And Matt and I were like, what? This is this is super cool.
Yeah. Early
Um,
on, probably the first month, we ordered from a Mexican food place, this carry out, and they had like the pandemic special. And it was like fajitas for two and beans and rice and chips and a half gallon of margarita.
Margaritas.
Yep. I'm like, sweet.
Totally.
I'll take that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the other statistics I found, which is not a happy or fun statistic, is that heavy drinking episodes, again, those qualified with 4+ drinks within a couple hours, increased 41% um, in 2020. And that was from a Rand Corporation study that was published in October. So, I think we can have a very sober, no pun intended, conversation about this topic too, because I mean, sure, we can, it's all well and good to joke about it and have some fun with it. And obviously Michael and I are very moderate in our approach here. We realize it's not like that for everyone. So
Right.
let's talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons, like possible benefits. Here are the possible downsides. And then just maybe like dive into some of the ways that alcohol is not helpful for people, and maybe some alternatives
Mhm.
to, if you are one of that 44% that has significantly increased
Yeah.
um, those heavy drinking episodes.
Okay. So, I mean, we kind of,
So go
go
ahead.
ahead. Okay. We touched base a little bit, but So alcohol does have, calories, but very little nutritional value, so there's, which we've talked about before, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But if it's in excess, your calorie consumption versus your nutrient consumption may not be in a ratio that would be favorable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, like we addressed, it lowers inhibition, and judgment. You can tend to overeat other foods that don't get prioritized to metabolize, so they're stored as energy for later use. These can be unfavorable things. Also, like we mentioned, it can negatively impact hormones, in particular testosterone, which,
Mm-hmm.
like we said, it helps with shedding body fat and muscle growth, that kind of stuff. And lower testosterone is also it can be associated with, or it can be an indicator of metabolic syndrome. There's a
Mm-hmm.
correlation there, which, metabolic syndrome can lead to higher cholesterol, higher blood pressure, increased blood sugar levels, higher body mass index, those things, which can really have a negative impact on your health. Alcohol, it can affect sleep, particularly just kind of, wakefulness periods throughout the night.
Mm-hmm.
Disrupted poor sleep. First of all, I think a lot of us are already bad sleepers. We
Right.
don't get enough. We don't get a good quality or a good quantity of it. And then if we have increased disrupted sleep, I mean, that affects hormone production, that affects, our stress levels. It affects, our ability to, have willpower and discipline with, food choices or exercise choices. We just don't have the energy to get through the day like we would, to give our workouts, the whatever. We don't have as much
The
energy for our
attention,
workouts.
the
Yeah.
effort, the
Yeah. The
discipline
effort.
they warrant. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so it can really kind of cascade with some things. It's in and of itself, it's one thing, but it really can kind of snowball into some other things that may not be super favorable.
Yeah.
It can also, impact how well your digestion, um,
Mm-hmm.
how that works, and how well you absorb nutrients too. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it can irritate the stomach, and that's something that I'll talk with people about if they're, especially athletes, if they're coming to me with problems with their, stomach or bowel movements or having
Hmm.
issues there, and I notice that there's a pretty strong consistent alcohol
Hmm.
component to their intake, then we will talk about that. Um, some of the other physiological impacts of alcohol is that when it's metabolized, you do create free radicals, these highly reactive components that interfere with other cells and can cause mutations and
Hmm.
problems in your body. We do see it associated with higher risk of some cancers. Um, there's we do see it associated with a higher risk of stroke, which is interesting because one of the possible benefits is a
Right.
lower risk of ischemic stroke. And so there's I mean, you have to weigh these pros and cons.
Yeah.
There's medication interactions that people have to be aware of. And, of course, if you're pregnant or trying to become pregnant, there could be fetal damage.
Hmm.
There's absolutely no safe lower level of alcohol for pregnancy. They're
Right.
just, I mean, it's been studied, and there are, risk associations, but there is no like safe lower limit.
Right.
Um, and then just, the oxygen deficits in the liver that we talked about earlier. So that hypoxic, effects that
Hmm.
people can experience. So yeah, there's one of the other things on athletes. You mentioned testosterone and all of those great things about, how it impacts athletes and
Hmm.
sleep and stuff. Muscle protein synthesis is often impaired. And, we hear this like the recovery beer. People get all excited about like, oh, yeah, I'll have beer after my, marathon or
Get
something.
them carbs in.
You know, um, sure, you're getting fluid and you're getting some carbs and you're getting a little bit of electrolytes, and it probably tastes really good. And it's hitting the reward mechanism in your brain. Um, but the alcohol, remember what we said about how alcohol is preferentially metabolized? So the alcohol is being processed really quickly. It's going to take a little while for those carbs, and there aren't a ton of carbs in beer. I mean, when you look at it compared to
Right.
other high carbohydrate foods, it's not like this magical source of carbs,
Yeah.
or electrolytes. And there's no protein. So I am not, I mean, if you like ran your marathon and you're not going to go train or do whatever and you could give two hoots about recovery, then sure, enjoy your finish line beer, do your thing. I've done it, no
Mhm.
judgment. However, if you're implementing this into part of your training strategy, which I've seen people do where they're like, yeah, we're going to end our ride at and go have a beer before they have any food
Mhm.
or anything as recovery, from a sports nutrition standpoint, I'm like, well, here here are the trade-offs to that behavior. And especially if you're an older individual who still wants to be active and train for something,
Mhm.
my advice is to really take care of that sports nutrition recovery component. So having a whatever it is, a protein shake or smoothie, having a sandwich, eating a meal, enjoy your beer either, at the later parts of the meal or after you're done with that.
Mhm.
Give your body a chance to get those nutrients into the system and recover a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, Protein synthesis will thank you. Your hydration status will thank you. Your glycogen status will thank you.
Yeah.
And then enjoy your alcoholic beverage
Yeah.
after.
Yeah. You want to talk about some benefits,
Sure.
some
Which
bennies?
again, I think it's kind of funny that people get really don't people get super excited about the benefits? Like, oh yeah, this is alcohol has, wine has resveratrol, which is like
Yeah.
this, antioxidant compound and it's blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but if you just like eat some
Antioxidants.
veggies, actually would
Yeah.
have more.
Yeah. So let's say, yeah. In fact, we talked about this before we started recording. We're not going to say benefits. We say possible benefits,
Possible.
right? Because it's not like, if you have a drink or two every night, there's going to be this amazing health benefits that you have
Right.
going on.
Right.
And a lot of these are corollary. It's not like this many drinks equals this. It's like Aaron said earlier, it seems like, people who have a few drinks a week tend to be more. It may not have anything to do with the drinks, right? It may
Right.
be that people who drink in moderation tend to be healthier in other ways, and that impacts it. But so possible
Yep.
benefits. All right.
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead.
I was just going to
We're
start
gonna
listing them, but you can do it too. Go for it.
go. Okay, you can go. See how polite I'm being? I'm not talking over you.
I just feel like I've done a lot of talking. I get on my high horse with the whole athletes and alcohol thing. So
That's all right.
maybe I should give it a break.
You don't have to get off your high horse.
So the big one that we hear is reduced risk
Like,
of
okay, fine, I'll
developing
go.
or let's get this show on the road.
I like that.
Reduced risk of developing or dying from heart disease. So we hear that one a lot, especially with wine. Wine is good for your heart. It's a vasodilator, so it's good for circulation.
Mhm.
Possible reduction in stroke risk, and that's ischemic stroke risk. So that's the kind that's caused by a blood clot,
Mhm.
for the same reasons why I just listed for heart disease. Possibly reducing risk of diabetes, which is an interesting one to me because
Mhm.
usually when I'm working with a client who has diabetes, I'm really steering them away from alcohol just because of how it introduces some challenges to carbohydrate metabolism and
Right.
predictive nature of that. However, there has been some research on showing that this moderate alcohol consumption, and again, that's having a little bit each day of the week, not like
Mhm.
saving up these drinks and going on a bender on a
Right.
Friday night.
So,
That can
real quick.
possibly reduce diabetes.
So I
Mhm.
understand on like heart disease and stroke, like as a vasodilator, that means arteries get a little bit bigger. There's a little more room in there, right? What are the benefits? What do they think the benefits are for, not benefits, possible benefits or correlation with that and reducing risk of diabetes?
So let me find it here. It was in this Harvard School of Public Health study.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
I know I've got to find it again and explain what they talked about.
Do you want me to keep going while you look?
Yeah, maybe go on and
Okay.
let me find this again.
Okay. So, other possible benefits would be like social, psychological benefits. A lot of people have a drink just to kind of unwind. There's very much a relaxation effect. Kind of, I think for a lot of people, it can kind of serve as um, a routine or ritual of kind of putting the day to bed and moving into the evening where things are more relaxed, stress is lower, that kind of stuff. There can be, good social benefits as far as with friends, family, that kind of stuff, where you're just a little more relaxed, you're more engaged, you're maybe shedding stresses of the day, that kind of stuff. And there can also be some improved digestion. Want me to keep going?
Sorry, was all of my clickety clackety
It was, yeah, it
getting
was
behind you?
so loud.
So
No, not really.
that article that I had didn't explain. It just said that there is
Hmm.
a possible decreased risk in gallstones and diabetes. But then I just found
Okay.
another one on the same Harvard School of Public Health that talks about this study for men's risk for type 2 diabetes. And it really, it's talking about, you know, occasional drinkers who increase their intake to moderate levels, say 1 to 2 drinks a day, reduce their type 2 diabetes risk. Um,
Interesting.
by no means do we interpret this data to say that people take up drinking to reduce their diabetes risk, but it does give a little insight into the mechanism of action. And then
So,
I'll have to get into this mechanism of action,
uh,
but
so
it
I
could
could
get pretty
see
deep.
like if you tend to drink more heavily and all those things we talked about, inhibition is lower, you tend to eat more um, during those drinking periods, typically, higher carbohydrate foods, and that stuff is stored more, increase in, body fat tissue there's a relationship there in type 2. So I could see that, but that's interesting that from like occasional to
So,
moderate that there's a
yeah.
decrease.
So this says the researchers discuss a number of potential physiological mechanisms for how this might work. They found indications that increased alcohol consumption to moderate levels was associated with improved hemoglobin A1C levels. Um, like previous studies by others, the researchers found alcohol increased. Oh, geez, this is adiponectin levels, a hormone that improves insulin sensitivity,
Hmm,
protecting against type 2 diabetes. So again, we see that hormonal component coming into play. Um,
interesting.
and whenever we look at these studies, we talked about this with Dr. Nadolsky's, a few months ago, that sometimes you see these studies and it raises more questions for me. Like,
Right.
well, they may have increased their alcohol consumption from low to moderate, but how did that affect the rest of their diet?
What
And
else
how did that
changed?
affect maybe their stress levels?
Hmm.
Because stress is a huge player in diabetes, heart disease, all of that stuff. So
Hmm.
I do, whenever I read these studies, I'm cautious about how I interpret them, but then
Right.
it is just one more piece of information.
Hmm.
Um, again, this reiterates that A, don't start drinking if you're a non-drinker.
Right.
and B, be mindful about how this impacts other areas of your health. I mean, if
Hmm.
these people started drinking moderately, they upped their alcohol intake, and consequently that caused them to eat crappy food, I would imagine we'd see a very different outcome.
Right.
So then it makes me wonder, like, what else is going on?
Yeah.
So anyway,
Well, and I wonder too,
yeah,
like, sometimes when you increase your mindfulness in an area, it increases in other areas. So if people are like, okay, as part
totally.
of the study, I'm being intentional and increasing this. So I'm just paying attention to more things, that could affect how people eat, why they eat, that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering if there's something there
Yep.
too.
Yep. So,
Yeah.
what are some, when I was perusing the internet for that article, did you review any guidance or ideas or maybe suggestions for people?
Well, I just have kind of what I have done before with clients. And I think, it's important to understand like why. I think what's behind any action or behavior is pretty important to understand. And if someone has a drink or two, several nights a week, and it's really just I just like to relax, it kind of helps usher in the evening. It's just sort of my partner and I have a glass of wine together, whatever.
Right.
Great. And if it doesn't seem to be negatively impacting them and they don't have an issue with it, cool. But sometimes, I think those things are used as coping, like it's to quiet the, like
Yeah.
the
To escape.
stressors, and
Hmm.
yeah, it's to escape and to get away from what the world is bringing, to deal with emotions, that kind of stuff. And in that situation, well, yeah, okay, this is maybe not a healthy coping mechanism. I think it depends on, is this an enjoyment? Is this something that sort of you use to enrich your day, or is it something that you use to escape, or avoid? And in that case, I think it's important to look at some other, possible coping mechanisms. And one, sure, we don't want to be out of our scope of practice, right? There may be instances where it's like this may be a real problem, and you need to talk to somebody else about that. But at the
Right.
same time, there are things, some coping mechanisms I think that could work really well. I think we're going to talk about this real soon, but I think journaling is a fantastic one.
Hmm.
I think if we're trying to deal with internal stress or external stress, um, journaling can be a great way to help manage those emotions. I think physical activity can be a great way to manage those emotions. Or even just sort of kind of getting yourself distracted, like a conversation with somebody,
Sure.
a good
Call a
book,
friend or yeah.
get in the tub and just chill and relax. These kind of things, while they're not going to combat like an alcohol abuse issue by any means, I think they can take the place of potentially problematic consumption.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you hit on a good point of knowing yourself and being real with yourself, and also listening to, I mean, we're a lot of us are spending a lot more time at home around our families and our partners and, our roommates and whatever. So, you know, listen to what those people are observing
Mm-hmm.
too, and be real about that kind of stuff, even if it is just a suggestion that, like, man, we're really like drinking a lot more than we normally would, kind of observation, which I hear that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the statistics I mentioned, um, reflect that too. But be honest with yourself if this is helping or not. Is
Right.
this really serving me? Are there other things that I can be doing that would help me through whatever difficulty I'm going through right now, or can provide another means of
Mm-hmm.
escape or relaxation? um, and also knowing some of those patterns that emerge when you drink, like, so Matt will tell me that if he knows that if he has, like, is it the third beer? I think it's the third beer or the fourth beer that it's one of those two, that he knows if he's like, he can see it coming, right? So he's had the first, he arrived, he had a beer, he had the second, he's eating a little food. This is like at a social, if we're at a
Mm-hmm.
barbecue or something. He knows the point where that last beer he just had was a bad, bad idea. And he's going to
Things
regret
take a
it.
turn.
This is where we like go off the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you know yourself, and I always laugh because I'm like, you're so in tune with that. Why do you do it? Why do you? And he's like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Sometimes it just gets me. But most of the time he's like, he can see it coming and he's like, nope, mm-mm.
Yeah.
I need to just stop.
Yeah.
So it's similar back to that whole happy hour experience I was describing. When we get back to normal times and it is, safe to congregate in bars and we're doing our normal thing, going to happy hour
Mm-hmm.
after work or whatever it is, you know, be real with yourself. Like,
Right.
if you don't get your workout done in the morning, you have to get it done after work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you'd rather go meet your friends, or if you'd rather go out, and grab some appetizers, then be real with how that impacts other decisions you make in your life.
Right.
Um, Take just a pause. And I love your idea, Michael, of journaling about it and kind of writing out an intention or something. I think that can be really helpful for people too, to just
Yeah.
keep them like straight on what they intend to do or what they want to see happen in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Yeah, and make a list of those other ways you can answer some of those emotions or challenges you're running into.
Yeah.
Um, I know alcohol is available and it's one of the few things we really have like ready access to right now during the pandemic. But there are a lot of other options too. So
Yeah. Yeah.
think about that.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
anything else
I don't have anything
on
else. Do you have anything
alcohol?
else?
Nope,
Okay.
we're good.
Yeah. So
What's your meaning in the
you
mundane
want to
this week?
meaning in the mundane it up?
Yeah.
Um, so I mentioned on, I don't know, an episode or two ago. I can never remember how we release them, but
It's like a time
recently,
warp.
I know, right? I started working with someone early in the morning at 5:15, so I'm getting up like 4:45, 4:50 in the morning, and which I used to do all the time when I worked in person, like 3 or 4 days a week, and it was fine. Even if I had was wound up being up late, one night, I was fine. I was just used to it. I could handle less sleep, and being up early wasn't an issue. I haven't done that for a very long time, close to a year, I think. And it was just kicking my butt. It's just like I was dragging and I wasn't like good at getting to sleep early enough to get up that early, and I was just like less than 6 hours of sleep for like several days in a row. And it just, I felt like crap. But this week I'm adjusting and it's better. And so Monday morning, I think it was Monday morning. Um, I got up, right, and I can get ready pretty quick. Turn the coffee pot on, and I had about because this person just lives like 2 houses down, right? So I go there and we trade in her driveway, and I had like 10 minutes, I think, before I needed to leave, and I just sat in a chair with my cup of coffee. My whole house is pitch black, so I'm not turning lights on to wake anybody up. You know what I mean? It's black outside and it's
Yeah.
really, really quiet. And I just sat there for, 7, 8 minutes and drank a little bit of coffee and had this just like moment of utter silence to myself,
Nice.
you
Just you
know.
and your coffee.
Yeah. And it was really, really nice. It was like this great 8 minutes, just like, this is nice.
Isn't it nice how just like that it's a short amount of time, but when you're doing
Yeah.
just nothing but sitting
Nothing.
here and being
Yep.
that, I
And just
mean, it can
very
probably feel
mindfully
mhm.
enjoying my coffee. Because once I get down the train, it's just like, okay, it's cold and I'm tired. So this is like necessity. But just to like,
Yeah.
just be just like, I really like this coffee we got. And I really like how it tastes. And it's warm. It feels good. And I'm
And you
waking
just have this
up. And
moment to
yeah,
yourself,
it was
like this
wonderful.
nice little,
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
One of my friends always, she is a morning person too. And we would go like do morning runs and morning,
Mhm.
whatever, bike rides together. And one morning we ended our run and we're standing outside my house and the sun is just coming up and she just like sighs and she looks and she goes, this is free time right here. This is like, I always feel like I have a little secret, when you get out before everybody else or when
Mhm.
you're up and the house is quiet. And
Yeah.
I agree. Like I just feel like that time is just so it can be really precious and
Yeah.
it can feel very like special. So
Free
I
time.
like
I
it.
like that's how it feels.
Free
Like,
time.
ooh, I got
Yeah.
some extra time today. Like I
I know.
found a $5 bill in
I know.
my, wallet or my pants or something. Like, yes, free money. Yep. How about
So
you?
I made Christmas cookies this weekend, and this is a tradition that we have had in my family. I don't know. I have to call my grandmother and ask if her mother did this as well, but I
Mhm.
know that this is a family recipe that has been passed down for generations. In fact, I posted pictures on Instagram and one of my cousins commented and sent me a picture of his family cookie
Nice.
bake that they did
They
this
looked
weekend,
really
same
good.
yeah, same side of the family. So gingerbread cookies, it's my first time. I've made them with my mom, of
Mhm.
course, for years, but it's my first time making them completely from scratch on my own. I've done every step of the process with her in her kitchen or
Mhm.
by myself in her kitchen or whatever, but never just like fully on my own with my own ingredients and my own equipment and
Mhm.
everything. So it was really fun. And I'm pretty savvy in the kitchen. So I got it figured out, even though I, had a couple hiccups that I had to call her and be like, what would you do? How could I,
Yeah.
and it was just lovely, like made cookies and did this very familiar holiday activity that's a tradition in my family, but we're not going to be together for Christmas this year. And so it was perfect. And Matt is just loving the cookies. They're delicious. I'm sharing a few with friends here and there because that's part of the whole idea, is that you make a ton of them and then you just give them to
Right.
people as they show up, at your door
Mhm.
for something, or you run into them for whatever reason. So
Mhm.
yeah, that was
Nice.
my meaning in the mundane, just a
I
simple,
like that.
and it's simple for me. And then people started asking for the recipe. And so I typed out like all the steps last night
Mhm.
for a few friends. And I was like, okay, this suddenly sounds really complicated. Like I understood that there is so much I have learned over the years of making these cookies that's
Mm.
just intuitive to me, that I can just
Yeah.
read how the dough is feeling and how to do this and how thick it needs to be rolled and what they look like when they're
Mhm.
baking. And if you take them, whatever. And I'm typing it all out and I'm like, oh boy, there's a lot going on here. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was
It's
mine.
awesome. Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we have one last thing to share. I bet you forgot, Michael, but I didn't.
You know what? I know what you're going to say. So do I get credit for that? I would have forgotten, but I know what you're going to say.
Do you want to
So
announce
it was
it?
like on deck. Or wait, announce it. Maybe I
Well,
don't know.
yes, you do.
I do.
We have our first
Oh,
supporter.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
Our
have our
dear
first supporter.
friend, Leslie Walla,
Yeah.
found out we haven't even announced this yet, you guys. We set
Mhm.
up that you can support our podcast. You go
Listener
to
support.
Anchor. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Mhm.
Just go to Middleish on Anchor, and I think there's a link actually in any platform you listen
I
to.
think
So if
so.
you're on Spotify, if you're on Apple Podcasts, you can click the
Mhm.
link that says support this podcast,
Right.
and you can choose a level. There's a few different options there to just support us monthly,
Mhm.
and we've been, I think, kind of waiting to announce this until we had like some, I don't know,
Who knows what we were waiting
selling
for?
some like sales pitch or who knows, but our dear friend Leslie found it and we got a
Mhm.
little surprise in our inbox that we have our first supporter. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Leslie. We
Very much.
appreciate it.
Yeah, we really do appreciate it. And if you, if you would like to support what we're doing, if you feel like there's a lot of value in this, we would appreciate, any support you can give.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sharing with a friend,
Hmm.
rating it, reviewing it.
Those are all
All of
support
that
too. Yeah,
is all support. So
absolutely.
thank you so much to our listeners,
Yep.
and
And enjoy your
we'll
booze.
catch you next time. Yeah. enjoy those booze in moderation.
Bye.